also a man. And I have a male body, and so I know something about how the body of the mind of a man work. And I know something of the conditioned nature of men, and I understand how difficult it can be to be a conditioned soul in a male body, as it can be for any conditioned soul in any body. So I like to say that I'm just an ordinary person who met a very extraordinary guru and was smart enough, amongst many stupid things I did in my life, at least smart enough to recognize Prabhupada as a guru and accept him. And anything good that has transpired in my life or you see in me has come as a result of that. So, having said that, I have a question for you, Miss Sadhvi Sangha, in person. You have your name as Sadhvi Sangha Devi Dasi. So, I actually wanted to give this talk for maybe the last 15 years because I would sometimes tell women what men are like, and they sometimes go into a state of denial or shock and say, no, they can't be like that. And say, oh yeah, they're like that. And I would realize that there's certain things about men that women would be difficult for them to understand or know, unless they could get inside the body of that man, or they could remember their last life as a man. And so for many years I thought, I just would like to get women together and tell you all the things about men that you would think, well, that's crazy, why are they like that? But I wanted to talk about the sexual makeup of the male body, but I don't know if that's appropriate to start with, Saradiya, or you wanted to start with some other questions and get into that later. What would you prefer?
Prabhu, I think if you feel that is the most appropriate, then you can start with that. I think
I don't know if it's appropriate, but it's maybe it's better for the end. It will definitely keep you awake.
I mean, I think it's something we could all benefit from understanding.
Yeah. This, I always find talking about male-female nature to be quite entertaining and funny, even though I don't intend it to be that way. I've given many, many talks on male and female nature, and they've actually turned out to be like comedy routines, just because we as human beings are so funny the way we live and respond. So if any of this sounds funny, it's not necessarily meant to be. It's just the fact that we are funny as people in how we think and react and live. And some of it might even sound a little sick in sometimes. You say, how could they be that way? That sounds sick. And in some cases it is, in some cases it can be sick, and a lot of that has to do with the culture we live in. So I want to start with an example. And I would like you all to think of your favorite food, like blueberry halva with sweet rice on top, or kofta, or you ever have malpur, the round malpurs? You ever have those? They in yogurt sauce? Yeah. Like, I don't see them around ISKCON lately. But Sharadiya Rasa, when you type, we can hear you. Can you go on mute? Okay, thank you. Yeah. So whatever your favorite preparation, you obviously have more than one, but think of one of your favorite preparations. And now imagine you haven't eaten all day. And you're really, really hungry. And you see that preparation, that combination. your favorite preparation, and pretty much you're starving. You're not starving, but you haven't eaten all day, so you come home and you use the expression, I'm starving, I have to eat something, right? And there on the table is that kafta or that blueberry halava or whatever it is. Okay, make sure you're sitting down when I tell you what this analogy is like. And of course, we're generalizing. All men are not exactly the same, and they're not all exactly the same. In areas, they're the same to the same degree. So, we're dealing general, okay? This is an analogy of what it's like when a man sees an attractive woman, how he's affected by that. Sexually, it is like a hungry person seeing their favorite preparation. As sick as that may sound to a woman, this is how God designed the male form. And so it's like men are so sexually wired that I once read this conversation between a father and a husband, a father and a son, and there was some figure that young boys think about sex like every, I don't know, 40 seconds, just something crazy. And the father told the son, and the son said, well, what am I supposed to think in between those 40 seconds? It's like men are so wired sexually that it predominates them, especially stimulated visually. That's the first way men get sexually stimulated. I'm not talking about romance. I'm not talking about bonding and connection. I'm just talking about the physical sexual desire. It's extremely strong in the male. It's like a man. The example I gave was like especially for a young boy. Young boys, when in their late teens, early 20s, they're very much wired that way. And sometimes we hear this excuse, when a boy rapes a girl or a date rape, well, it's how she dressed, and the girls say, what a lame excuse that is. And it's true, it's a lame excuse. But what happened was he was hungry and his favorite preparation was on the table. And if he just didn't have the favorite preparation, maybe he would have been okay. It's his fault that he ate it, but it's good for you to know that men are sexually stimulated visually. They don't have to touch, they don't have to do anything else. Just seeing is a very strong stimulant. As you would salivate if you were hungry and you saw your favorite food. Something like that. And so the reason I say this, and I think maybe it will make more sense to you, when you see all the restrictions that traditional cultures put on male and female, or why in traditional cultures women cover themselves. It's not just India with the sari. It's every culture in the world. Women cover themselves from head to toe. Just go back 100 years, maybe 100 years, yeah, maybe around 100 years. Go back 100 years. Just Google for fun if you haven't done this yet. Go back 100 years. How did women dress in 1920? Maybe 1920 is too late because things went crazy. 1910, turn of the century. Have you ever done that? Victorian, you're women. You know about Victorian dresses and Victorian dressing. And sometimes we joke that person's very Victorian. It's like they're kind of, it's a derogatory, it could be a derogatory term, just saying that they're very modest, like overly modest. But that's how women dressed. And so there's a reason for that. So in terms of your interaction with men, it's important to know that. And there's another situation which I've noticed, which is important to know. Now, some of you are married. It's maybe less important. But also, it's just important to know in general. the male generally, and you ladies, you know this because there's such a demand on you to look beautiful. And what's happening now in society, the demand on you to look beautiful is coming from ever since Photoshop came into the world, your life as women probably got a lot worse because now they could make average women look like apsaras. And so you see them on the covers of magazines and you look at them and think, oh, well, that's the standard. I'm supposed to look like that. If I don't look like that, I'm not beautiful. But that's only half the problem, because the guys are looking at those magazines and in their mind, that's what the women are supposed to look like. They're supposed to look like those models, those airbrushed Photoshop models on the covers of about 90% of the magazines that exist in the world. It's a picture of a young, beautiful woman. So it's hard for you, but it's made it more difficult because now that's what the men expect. So you're getting it both from the media and you're getting it from the men who expect you. The problem is when you look like that, they say they love you, and be very careful when they say they love you. Because a lot of times, consciously or unconsciously, they don't realize when they say they love you, and you may not realize it either. They're saying, I would love to have sex with you. That's what's actually going on, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And if they say they love you, say, that's fine, but I'm celibate, and see if they still love you. So now, there's another thing going on in our society. I don't know how aware you are of this, but I think pornography has now become the biggest addiction in the world. And I just have to explain a little bit so you understand how many men are exposed to this and what it's doing to their minds. As you know, with the internet, the drug of pornography is available to anyone who has a smartphone. And because of that, nice men who otherwise would not be interested in it are watching it because oftentimes it just comes up. And what it's doing is it's sexualizing them more and more, and it's making them objectify women more and more. So you have now a culture where I don't think women have ever been objectified as much today as any time in history, because of all the images of women, not just pornographic images, but in music and in movies and in billboards and so forth. So it's contaminating the mind of men, because for men, sexual enjoyment is that's the closest you get to being God. That's the closest you get to fulfilling your mission in this world to imitate Krishna. And in fact, Prabhupada said we come to this world because we're attracted to beautiful women. It's in the Bhagavatam, in the purport, which is, it's an amazing thing to think about. But the point is, men are so wired sexually that they need to live in a culture that prevents that from festering. It controls it. So Vedic culture controlled it. But our society not only does not control it, but it unleashes it on men. And men can't handle this. And then they get addicted to pornography. And when they get addicted to pornography, it starts to alter their relationship with women even more. So then there's more of a need for women to be beautiful. There's more that they're seeing them sexually, and then there's an obsession. So it's just, and you might say, well, are devotee men like that? Are all men like that? And the answer is no, not all men are exactly like that. Not all, I would say, you could say in general, all men are wired that way. Some men come into this world very renounced because of their past devotional service, more evolved spiritually. Some men have bodies and minds that are more sattvic, more peaceful. But a lot of our young men that are becoming devotees are coming right from the hurricane of that. They've grown up with it. and they're trying to be brahmacharis, they're trying to be grihastas. And for some of them, it's extremely difficult. And this pornography thing is an epidemic, not an epidemic, it's a pandemic, and it's getting worse. So what I would say to you in regards to this is knowing that you could be the man's favorite food and knowing that pretty much they're always hungry, just be a little careful in your dealings with men. Even if you're married and it's other men, don't think that nothing's going to happen. Just be a little careful, a little formal, how you look, how you present yourself. We know we have a problem in India with single women in India. The Indian men think that Western women, basically they think they're prostitutes. And they often deal with Western women that way. And so, especially in India, you have to be extremely formal and cold and distant with Indian men because that's how the Indian women are. And if you're not that way, it sends a message to them that you're open for their advances. So I think now in Kali Yuga, being a woman could be the most difficult time in known history, at least the history that I'm aware of. It may be one of the most difficult times. I'm not a historian, but at least in recent history that I'm aware of, this is probably the most difficult time to be a woman because of how sexualized the boys are growing up in this culture with that music, with the media, and now with the pornography, which when I was young, we didn't have internet. So pornography was not a big thing because you couldn't buy it if you were a kid, and you couldn't carry it around with you because your parents would see it. But now it's a totally different thing. So this is it's a sad situation, but it's a reality. And I would just want you as women to understand what the men go through and to try to help them and not try to do anything that would disturb them. And sometimes you could unknowingly disturb them just by the way you dress, the way you deal with them, the way you talk to them, the way you smile with them. I mean, it sounds crazy, and I'm not saying every man is like that, but some men are. And I don't want to tell you any more details because it probably disgust you, but I just wanted to mention that that's a general wiring of the sexual nature of male, and some men just control it better than others. Now, some of you may be saying, but what about in marriage? When you're a devotee and you want to practice celibacy in marriage, or practice it, or make the effort to practice it as best you can, although it can be difficult, a lot of times your husbands will not want to be physical, and they'll say, well, why don't you give me a hug? And they'll say, well, if I give you a hug, then I'll get sexually disturbed. And as women, you think, what's wrong with him? Or just, there's just affection, it's not sexual. But the male wiring doesn't always work that way. Some men, yeah, it's not a problem. When they're older, it's not a problem. But for some younger men, they can't even show affection, and you're thinking there's something wrong with him, but he's thinking, if I show little affection, then I'll go from 0 to 100 very quickly, and then I'll become sexually disturbed, maybe not be able to control myself. So it's important to be aware of that. That's the challenge that men have. And it starts with the eyes. And then when there's physical touch, it's very difficult for them to control themselves, for most men. And there's one more thing, and I've discussed this with many men, maybe you experience this as women. When you're giving up something, somehow the attraction becomes stronger when you give it up. Like I'm not going to do this anymore, right? I'm going to fast today, and therefore I'm going to throw all the food out of my house so I can fast. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, there's no food in my house. And you're just thinking of food. So sometimes when you give up something, you think about it more. Isn't it? You have that experience? You give up something and then you think about it more. So all these men who are joining now in the West, pretty much they've been they've been introduced to sex, most of them, not all, but I would say the majority, right around the time of puberty. And that's kind of what they've been used to, whether it's actually having sex or other pornography or other forms of sex with oneself. Most men from puberty have been dealing with that. And then they become brahmacharis and they cut it off. And sometimes when you cut it off, the desire even becomes stronger. As you know, when you fast, you become hungry. So just have a little sympathy on the poor brahmacharis when you're in the temple and how you deal with them, how you dress, how you address them. And, a lot of times this is discussed with women, and the women's thought is like, well, it's their problem, not mine. And it's true, it is their problem. But you could help them with that problem by just being more formal, dressing in a way. The less you show of your body, the better. The less they see of your body, the less they'll think about anything other than you or mother or sister. But the more you show the body, then the male mind, it triggers these things. Many times as a Sankirtan leader, we would have difficulty with the men because all day they were doing distributing books in shopping centers, and it's all women. And they'd come back and say, I'm really disturbed all day, I'm talking to women. The women usually wouldn't come back and say, all day I'm disturbed talking to men. We are wired differently. So, I don't know. Did that make you sick, scare you, or I shouldn't have said that, or what? Or all three?
Prabhu, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think that some ladies might have a problem hearing that. I'm not speaking for myself personally, but I know that some ladies sort of struggle with feeling like they would be blamed because of how they dress.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I understand that.
So,
I have a daughter, so we talk about these things, and she's like, it's not our fault. I understand that.
so how would you address ladies who
Well,
maybe are...
well, we could pose it like this and say, oh, there's Maharaj and you're a woman, so you should be formal because he's a sannyasi. Maybe with a grihastha man, you'd be a little less formal or slightly closer, but he's a sannyasi, so. And then some person could say, well, if he's a sannyasi, he's more detached. So why do you have to be so formal as a woman with him? And so cold and so forth. He's more advanced, he's a sannyasi. But it's out of respect. It's just out of respect for the person. So if we could understand that, yes, it is the fault of the man, but it is a weakness inherent in the man. And that knowing that, it's not your fault, or you're not to blame that that you're attractive to a man. You didn't do anything wrong to be attractive. But in terms of how you dress, how you interact, how you present yourself, it could have a good or a bad effect on him. So out of just sympathy, compassion, whatever word you want to use, to understand that, it will help you. Knowing the mind of men, it will help you to help them. And Kamini, it's interesting if you look at traditional cultures, how the sexes were so segregated and how people dressed and they covered their body. And I think part of the problem we have is we're not raised in that culture. So when we talk about these things, they seem like unnatural or prudish or some kind like out of touch or so forth, because of how we were raised. And so, well, that's so Victorian, but there's reasons behind that. Let me tell you something that Prabhupada said. He said, in his youth, they could not speak to the women. And he said all the boys wanted to, but they couldn't. And he said it was just a safety valve in society. I have a disciple, he's, I think, 60 years old. He said for 4 years in university, there was one class. They all went together, male and female. And he never spoke to a woman. No woman ever spoke to him in 4 years. It's the culture. So it's not the culture we grew up in. So I think we need to see things in maybe a bigger context that would help us. So go ahead. I know you want to say more.
Well, there's a comment just came in from Facebook, and because this discussion is geared specifically for female devotees, we're taking questions and comments from the ladies. Although men are watching on your Facebook page, but in the Zoom meeting, we just have ladies. So there's one lady that says, I'm struggling. It's all on women to keep that. Is it all on women to keep them from being disturbed? Men are unwittingly wired to be this way. Is there a wiring they have to, is there, sorry, the
Yes, I understand.
is a little, what is wiring they have to check this unbridled sexuality? I'm really struggling hearing this discussion.
No, they definitely have to control it. There's no question. I wasn't saying these things as an excuse for men, but I'm trying to give a reality check that there's a lot of men that are not well controlling themselves because of the way they were raised in this very sexualized society. So the kind of men that are coming out in the world today have grown up in this sexualized society. In traditional societies, they didn't grow up that way. And so now what they're having to deal with, whoa, it's so much more difficult. And it's not an excuse at all, but to understand the struggle they're going through, I'm hoping will help you better relate to statements like, well, men and women shouldn't be so close and you should dress this way. And you might think, why should I do that? Why can't these guys be strong? And they're trying, no doubt, but they're not always so successful. And the other thing I would say is that I deal with a lot of men who have addictions to pornography. And it's definitely an addiction. And it's not something they want, but it's something that started before they were devotees. And because it's an addiction, it's difficult to give up. And so I'm beginning to understand more because of dealing with them. I'm beginning to understand how deeply ingrained this problem is in many, many men. And then I was speaking to a devotee from India, and he said in India, pornography is a pandemic. It's the drug of choice now. It's and so these are realities we're living in. And are all men addicted? Do all men behave the way I said? Definitely not. Do all men have this serious challenge? They all have a challenge, but good men deal with it. They control it. But some men have greater challenges than others. They have different bodies and minds. They have different samskars from past lives. So I don't mean to speak in a way that the women should feel it's their fault, but rather it's kind of like if your best friend's an alcoholic and he's coming over to your house and you drink alcohol, just hide the alcohol. And if you say, why should I hide it? What's the big thing? No, he can't see it. If he sees it, that could be the end of his sobriety. So it's something like that, Knowing the condition of men, then you could know how to behave in a way that would be not disturbing to them. Let me say one other thing to address this, and then you can ask again. As you probably know, as women, sometimes in our movement, some people don't say such nice things about you. On occasion, you hear something like you're Maya, or the representative of Maya, or your body represents Maya, and you're thinking, what did I do? I just, And if you're beautiful, it's almost like a double curse, because then you're the cause of a man being lusty. And of course, that's ridiculous. But that's how a lot of men think. They don't understand the lust is in their heart, and they blame women. And because they're young, immature, they don't understand what's going on. And they see in the association of a woman who's not attractive, they're fine. In the association of a woman who's attractive, she becomes the enemy. So these are kind of unfortunate realities that we have to deal with men who are not in a mature position, which is a lot of young men. And one of the ways young men in their immaturity fight that attraction is by saying negative things about women. This was very prominent in ISKCON in the early days. I think it's less prominent now, but it's a defense mechanism. So then you get blamed for being the cause of attraction. But I want to say something that can resolve this. Prabhupada never blamed the women. Anytime there was any illicit connection of men and women, Prabhupada always blamed the man. He said it was his fault because he would allure her on, and the man is always meant to be the protector. So, Kamini, ask me more questions about this, because you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm not used to doing this. The same lady who asked that question also was asking, what are men doing to help themselves? So perhaps we can phrase that, okay. What can men do to help themselves? How can we encourage them to do that is how I would expand upon that.
Yeah. I just heard this beautiful thought yesterday, and I'll share it with you because it's beneficial for all of us. And it said, I gave a class on habits, so I was doing some research on habits. And this was a beautiful thought. It said, if you want to develop a new habit, you should create an identity that aligns with the habit. So let's say if we're using this example of a man who wants to be sexually pure, he should have more of the identity of a saint, a sadhu, a pure devotee, because the identity of a pure devotee is respectful towards the opposite sex. It's a controlled mind, controlled senses. So the more we can help them, I don't know how you would do it, but in some way, the more they can help themselves identify with themselves as devotees, as sadhakas, as disciples, as sadhus in the making, the easier it becomes for them to act that way, because the habits align with the identity. And so what happens for a lot of men, even though they're dressed in the dhoti and kurta, or as they say in Australia, kurta, yeah, it's kurta, but in Australia it's kurta. You have any Aussies here? They can say it for us? No, Aussie. We need a real Aussie pronunciation, a korda. Yeah. So even though they're dressed that way, sometimes they lose their identity as devotees and they start identifying with their lower nature. So that's one thing. We just started a group for sexual sobriety because so many men are challenged. So we started a 12-step program. I think there are others, or even 12-step non-devotee programs. We have a WhatsApp group for men to speak. So any place you can help in creating men's groups where they can talk about these things, or if you ever find out that a man has a problem, local 12-step groups, even they're non-devotees, so many non-devotees have gone to them and cured this problem. They get a lot of support. What I'm seeing and what I'm feeling after 50 years in ISKCON is that you can't ask men to be celibate without giving them lots of support. It's just a challenge that needs incredible support. So if they're living as brahmacharis in temples, they do get a lot of support, but some will need more. And just, for a man living outside, who's never lived in a temple and takes his vows, and then he's exposed to the workplace and all the women are there and he comes home and he's tired and he just wants to chill out and he just goes on YouTube and who knows what's going to come up, that he needs support. Because even a nice innocent man could end up addicted to pornography. And a lot of them are. I mean, I am in shock when these men come to me. They're the last people I would ever think that would have that addiction. But one thing leads to another, or they'll tell me, I did this when I was young and I thought I got over it, but it came back. Men have told me I lived in the brahmachari ashram 10 years, celibate, and now I'm married, and this whole pornography addiction, it came back. So there's got to be tremendous amounts of support. And, we call women mother, And so the more the women act like mother, the easier it is for men. Because a lot of times men, this is their argument. We're supposed to call the women mother, but they don't act like it, or they don't dress like it. And so, okay, it looks like we're blaming the women, but it's not exactly like that. But if you can understand, the man's not blaming you, but it's just, it can be an obstacle. So the more you're motherly with the men, more like your son, and it can help them a lot. Because Prabhupada said, men see women as mother, but they should see the men as son. So you can say, yes, son. Like we say, Mataji, I don't know what the word for son is in Sanskrit, but you can say, yeah, Kamaniya. What else?
So much, I don't really know men that want to be mothered by their wives, so I'm a little
No,
confused.
not by their wives, but by sisters, it's okay. No, not maybe not so much mothered, but in the purity of that relationship. Or you could say sister. Prabhupada didn't like it, but men don't want to be mothered by their wives. But in relationship of devotees in general, I'll leave it up for you to figure that one out. How they want you to act like a mother, which all they're saying is there's no sexual vibration. And here's the other problem. There may be no sexual vibration coming from you, but because their lust is so strong, you affect them that way, and that's not your intention. So sometimes there's nothing you can do other than, wear a burqa and a black veil. And then one Muslim man told me, not that we would do that, but one Muslim told me, he says, that doesn't work because it makes a lot of men more lusty because they want to see what's underneath it. So it's like, you can't win in a sense, but, you can do your best. Yes, what's next?
Point about support. Now, I have a two-part question about that. So I know of wives who live with husbands who do have a pornography addiction, and many of them can't help but take it personally.
Well, the wives take it personally, like it's their fault.
Yeah, husbands needing support themselves, and in that case, where they are feeling hurt from it, how can they then support their husband? Are they even in a position to? And then we also had one of our a question from Zoom: what type of support can we give?
Yeah. Well, number one, it's not generally, I would say generally, it's not the wife's fault, or any addiction. Any addiction is the fault of the person who becomes addicted. He may make excuses as to why I turned to this because you weren't nice to me. But in the recovery movement, they will help that man understand those are all your excuses to stay addicted. So any problem that any spouse is having that is of an addictive nature, they need professional help or they need recovery programs. So the best thing the wife could do is find out where there's a recovery program and enlist their husband and say, guess what? Guess where you're going tonight? Get in the car. Where are we going? We'll tell you when we get there. It's something like that. The addict needs that kind of pushing. And once they get in that program, it's so powerful that if they stick to it, they'll overcome it. Mm-hmm. So maybe she should read about the recovery program and talk to somebody and get a better understanding so she can explain it to him. But if he wants, he can join our group, and there's so many men who can explain it, and we have our own groups, for just devotees. Mm-hmm. This is Australian. We have one now in Australian time, and I'm going to see if we can start one in European time, and then maybe eventually in American time. So we have multiple groups.
Perhaps after the meeting, I can get those links from you, and we can share them.
Yeah.
Facebook.
There's a Facebook page called Sexual Sobriety Support for Vaishnavas.
Okay.
And in this sense, Vaishnavas means just men, and we're also working on one for women.
Wonderful. And I know another issue would be that devotees would be very wary to step forward because of the sensitivity of
Yes,
that they would
yes,
want anonymously because
yes,
worldwide
yes,
family and give us
yes,
no. So I think that
yes,
makes it very difficult to reach out within the
yes.
Vaishnava for support.
So interesting you say that, because as you know, the class started late, and I have my WhatsApp is like Ravana's head. Every time you chop one head off, another one comes up. So I was actually, that's what was on my WhatsApp right before this class, because we're wanting to do this for females also. And then this whole discussion of being anonymous came up. And I think we have a solution for it. And what you say is definitely true. It can be very difficult, and the nature of ISKCON is that we're like one big family, and some people like to gossip, and that gossip may go around that you're in this group, which then would indicate you have some problem. Not all men have big problems that want to be in this group, but one thing we're contemplating now, it hasn't come up in our group, because most of the men in our group, they're okay with it now. I have to talk to them and see why this hasn't come up. But in the female group, the problem came up, and then we thought we'll do a Facebook group, and then you can create a new identity on Facebook, and then nobody would know. And that's probably the best thing, because it's true, in our society, someone may misunderstand. Although it takes strength to do this, and people should appreciate that you're doing it, some may misunderstand because they don't know what's involved. And these are good devotees with good sadhana who also become addicted. And addicted for a brahmachari just means once in a while. That's once in a while for a brahmachari is a fall down. They're not following their vows. So it's not like every day. For some, it's once in a while, but that once in a while is too much. And so they need some kind of support. And, you know, Kamaniya, I gave a talk in a brahmachari ashram about these problems. And, you know, one of the fears was opening up, because there was a fear that they wouldn't be able to stay in the ashram and they don't want to leave. So these groups are meant for opening up and being able to talk about the problems, which are important. And doing it with some degree of anonymity is certainly important consideration, for sure.
We had a question posed when we first promoted this event through our Sadvi Sangha group. And the question is, why do men want to connect mostly through sex? And how to match their high sex drive with the feminine lower sex drive?
Yeah. It's kind of like you're sitting down with a woman to eat, and she's just eaten a few hours ago, and she's not really hungry. So she's, okay, I'll sit with you. And then, you know, she takes a few things off your plate and tastes them. And you're fasting all day, and you've been drinking ginger beer all day. Not ginger beer is a South African drink. You're drinking a ginger drink, and you're starving. It's kind of like that. It's a physiological wiring of the body. When I go back to Godhead, I was going to ask Krishna, why did you do that? Because it sure made it difficult. Couldn't you make it any easier? But one thing we know for sure, that if sex weren't pleasurable, probably no men would have it, right? The world would cease to exist. And all you ladies who want to have kids, I don't know how you do it, because the men wouldn't want to do it. So Krishna has made it pleasurable so that it would work. But also he's made it pleasurable as a way to keep us entangled. And so the male body is made that way for procreation. But I can't say this with 100% certainty, but if I put on my social psychologist hat, I would say that men are created this way in order to propagate, but the sexualized society has made it a huge problem and made it extremely difficult for them. So it's kind of out of control for many men. And this is also, you know, it's also a consideration when you're getting married. to have some understanding of what are the sexual needs and habits of this man and what does he expect from you. And a lot of men will be honest about it. And you can ask him, have you ever, had addictions to pornography? Is that a problem? Are you, how important is sex for you? Because pornography is it's all just it's fantasy. It's a fantasy world. It's not a real world. It's fantasized, imagined sex. And that's what sex addicts do. And obviously, if you're married to one, it would be difficult. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted. I don't know if there is another answer or a better answer other than that's the way Krishna made men. And they were made so that they could procreate. Otherwise, they wouldn't want to. And they wouldn't even want to get married. Many men, if in their frank moments say, it wasn't for sex desire, why would I want to live with a woman? Some would say that. I wouldn't say many, but some would say that. Go ahead. Yes.
It's such a difficult topic to discuss because it's so loaded for so many reasons, and especially within our society, our ISKCON society, that we're so grateful to you that you are willing to put yourself in the firing line from all directions. And
I'm used to it. I'm used to being fired on.
You're incredible taking on these topics that nobody else wants to, and we're really grateful for that. I just wanted to address one comment that's on Facebook. It's a long one, so I won't read it, but she was saying how she's very grateful to you for discussing this. She's also very grateful to you for being able to speak about this with compassion and keeping with absence of politics in your sharing. And she says, I think this should be shared and spoken about on many platforms. This should not be just for women. Men and the youth should be exposed to this information for their benefits. There are too many adults who have communication issues and don't have the ability to address such issues on their own. On the other hand, regarding the level of putting it out there for the youth, there are legal issues that may need to be addressed. Sex education happens in school with consent forms. So just to that devotee and others who might be wondering, because we're a Vaishnavi group who's hosting this, we did want to give ladies an opportunity to pass on their questions. But it sounds like you're already saying that things are in the works to deal with this broader level.
Not as much as possible. I know Bhaktivedanta Swami is very concerned about this problem, and he's studying the whole sexual addiction problem, and he's studying it in order to come up with a program, at least in Russia, which then could be translated and copied. And in the meantime, I already started something because we have the 12-step program, and all the devotees who took it said that you can just go to it. If you're a devotee, it doesn't matter because it's all God conscious, and people are just sharing. And what I learned, I'm not an expert in this, but what I learned is one of the most important aspects is honesty and sharing. And that's what we need. And when we make something taboo to the point where we can't talk about it, then the problem festers. And once you can get it out and talk about it, that's the beginning of healing. And then, of course, we need those programs that can help it. And so in lieu of devotee programs, most major cities have 12-step programs that you can take advantage of for men, for women, for all kinds of addictions. It could be shopping addiction. It can be codependency addiction. It's all, I'm sure they're going to have addictions to these guys soon because this is such a problem. And all the studies show that it's the same addictive problem, your phone or a drug or anything. It's the same chemicals response, dopamine, whatever. So my realization is we just need more support for all four principles, especially two, sex and drugs. Those are the big ones. Drugs, not so much, but devotees do have problems. And sex, everyone has a physical body who wasn't basically a sannyasi in their last life and just kind of flew into the brahmachari ashram and sannyas. It has a problem with it. You want to know something interesting? Most of the sannyasis in India in our movement were never married. It's just not like there's a whole new group of sannyasis you'll see in the next few years, mostly Indians. And 99% of them were never married. It's just that's how they came into the world. Sexuality, female attraction, not a problem for them.
Mhm.
So there are men like that. But if you're not like that, then you've got to deal with it. Okay.
One of the ladies in our Zoom meeting actually addressed what you said. She says the lack of sex dialogue within ISKCON can lead people to suppress their sexual impulses without truly letting go of them. I believe this is the biggest problem for men and women.
It's a very, very difficult topic, which is why no one talks about it. And I talked about it once and I got in trouble for something I said. And because some of these things, when you talk about things frankly, then sometimes you start saying things that seem to contradict what Prabhupada taught us. And then you get in, but you're saying it in the sense that, well, this actually helped in this situation. But it's very difficult to say that in a public forum because it sounds like you're going against Prabhupada. And then you have the guilt and shame that comes when you're not able to follow your sexual vows or your personal vows or vows you made to your guru. But that's a whole other issue that's not being addressed. And how you get over it in marriage, that's not being openly addressed. And I agree 100%, it needs to be discussed. If you discuss it privately with many leaders, you'll have very productive discussions. But it's difficult to discuss publicly because not all of the private discussions align exactly with what is considered proper, although it may be beneficial in particular context. And I don't know. Some devotees think the guru issue is the biggest problem in ISKCON. I think, well, maybe this is number 2, or maybe it's number 1.
I'm going to just share 2 more questions on the sex topic, but I don't want to only stay there because there are other questions as well.
Yes, of course.
So I think probably a lot of ladies have. What to do if I tend not to have much sex desire to be intimate with my husband, but at the same time we both want children?
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard also from other devotees that they're in a difficult position because their husband is not a devotee, but they're a devotee, and they're having a very hard time following the regulative principles because of stay in their marriage.
Yeah.
Well,
the easy answer for me to get me off the hook is ask your guru. This is the secret. When something is this controversial, I could get myself in trouble.
And I think the questions that ladies should be asking senior ladies.
Yeah, that's good. And normally what I would say is that if she's having difficulty with her husband, is there a senior man he could speak to about his dealing with his desire? If his desire is what she feels unhealthy for their relationship or unhealthy for her spiritual life, is there a senior man that could talk with him about it to help him control it? And a lot of men have told me, I want to control it, but I'm too young and I just can't. And at that point, I realized one of the problems we have in ISKCON is that devotees need support so they don't say those things. They need support so they can say, now with this support, I can do this. I know devotees who were coming from very, very bad backgrounds, sexual addiction backgrounds, and they went to the SA program and they conquered those problems. They don't have them anymore. So seeing that, I feel, one day I was thinking, is it unjust or even violent to ask someone to follow these vows without giving them all the support they could need if they needed it? And my answer was yes. I think it's unfair to ask someone to make a vow without giving them support that they may need at some point. So that would be my general answer. My first line of defense: get that person support to help him. And in many cases, he can actually control himself where he thought he couldn't.
And actually, I'm going to read one comment from a male devotee who's saying on Facebook, I appreciate this very much. This difficulty is real for men. And I'm reading this because I think it's important for the ladies to hear.
Yeah.
And he said, I think that promoting support is where it's at. They really work. It isn't a matter of, quote, growing up. If it was so easily fixed, we wouldn't be discussing this. It requires some treatment like any other addiction. We have to be sensitive to each other, man and woman. So I really appreciate this comment from Mr.
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
Very nicely trained. I'd like to switch the conversation now to
Okay.
the feeling aspect.
Okay.
Question that we had was, how can we encourage our male partner to open up and feel free and safe to talk about his feelings, to cry, etc.?
One very, very important thing for women to understand, and I know sometimes women may not always be able to do this because sometimes you get upset with your husbands. But for a man to be put down, especially by his wife, is probably equivalent to drinking, it's probably worse than a root canal or a tooth getting pulled. If it was a question of choice of, you either could be put down by your wife or get a root canal. Oh, I'll take the root canal. That'll be less painful. You know? It's like the wife is the person they most want to respect them, and men have this inborn need to be respected. So the worst thing a woman can do is to do anything to belittle, condemn, put down, anything that makes a man feel disrespected. And this is a huge block to communication, because if you want to talk with a man and he thinks, okay, here we go again, she's going to tell me what's wrong with me, he'll just say, I don't want to talk. I don't want to open up. He'll shut down out of fear. If he opens up, she's going to say, oh, you are so stupid. You know, how can you, not saying that you would necessarily do that, but if you've ever done it in the past, put him down, which if you're married, I'm sure it's happened, it puts up a guard that he doesn't want to talk about it. So that's one thing to understand. If you want to get him to talk, you have to create an entirely safe environment where you're in no way going to judge him and you're going to accept him as he is. Then what I think the prelude to that, the precursor would be to, talk to him and say, I know as men, you don't always show your emotions. And I think it would be healthy for you to show your emotions. Maybe there's a book on it, connecting with your emotions, whatever. I want to tell you something funny. I did a workshop once, and there were younger devotees and older devotees. And one section of the workshop was about connecting with emotions. And I saw that the senior Prabhupada disciples had the hardest time connecting with their emotions. And it was almost like when they were asked to connect with their emotions, it was like the response was, what are emotions? Because we live a lifestyle where we're always discussing philosophy. So it's like, and men, you know how men work, they can turn off their emotions and just turn on their intelligence. And so as men, reading Prabhupada's books, preaching, discussing, we often live in our head, that world of analysis, and the world of analysis is antagonistic to the world of emotion. So when men sometimes are asked, how do you feel? They'll try to intellectualize it. What do you mean by feeling? What are feelings? They're not feeling anything. It's all analytical. And you as women will look at that and think, that's like so crazy. But sometimes you have to understand men and say, why it's good to feel, why it's good to express your emotion. And some men naturally do. And some cultures are more open, like South America, they're more open. Maybe Italy, maybe Spain. Some cultures are less open. it's not considered proper to express emotion. So that may have something to do with it. But you have to, if you can convince them it's good for them, why it's good for them, it's okay, and not in any way make them feel that they'll be condemned for how they feel, then maybe you can start getting the ball rolling. What I've realized is that any problem that you have to be able to feel the pain connected with the problem. And that's just a psychological principle, but it's a very valuable principle you can share with men, that if you're going to get through this problem and there's pain connected with it and you're unwilling to feel the pain and express that, you're going to run from that problem because you'll always be running from pain. But once you go through the problem, you dissolve the pain that's associated with it. So can I tell you a story? This is funny because maybe some men have this, but this is so stupid. I just realized this like 6 months ago or something. Or maybe it might have been that my daughter was upset or my wife was upset and I went silent. And then afterwards I went to her, my daughter, my wife, and I said, you know why I went silent? I just realized it. Because whenever my father got upset, whenever my mother got upset, it was always in the kitchen. She'd always say, I'm working so hard and no one's helping me. And she would complain. And sometimes she would really complain, like you wouldn't want to be in the kitchen. It was too crazy. So my father would go in the bedroom, and the bedroom was the furthest away from the kitchen you could get in the house. And then I would go in my room, and then my mother would just say, why doesn't anybody help me? What's wrong with you? You don't care. I work so hard. And then I realized, I said, I must have learned from my father that when a woman's emotional, just like let her vent and you go in your room and you just like turn off. And I said, that must be what I just did with you. When you got upset, I just like turned off and I didn't say anything. So who knows how these men were raised by their fathers? And if their fathers were like turning off their emotions, they never saw any emotion in their father, that's also another reason. And then one devotee told me, he said, Mahatma Prabhu, you know, I see that when you do music, all your emotion goes into music. And I said, oh, I never thought of that. He said, yeah, I thought I wasn't such an emotional person. He goes, no, it's all in your music. So I guess I learned from my father, when a woman has a problem, just like, run, you know, run till she cools down, and then everything's fine. And sometimes my mother would get upset, so upset she would just go. She'd get in the car and go out to like go shopping to calm down. Retail therapy, you know, she invented retail therapy, I guess. So and then she'd come back and she was fine. And so, what are these men's role models? You know, rough, tough, don't show emotion. It could be all these things. So I think a general answer, Kavaniya, to not only this question, but many problems that men have is that sometimes as wives, you just have to educate them. You're better in the emotional department, or if you're better in a certain department, you just have to educate them in a way that they'll want to hear because it's a safe environment. And I always joke, like if a woman says it's time to talk, that's like the worst mantra a man could ever hear. We have to talk. It's like, can I kill myself right now and reappear in like, you know, tomorrow? Men don't like that because they feel like they're going to have to deal, their wife's going to just lay stuff on them and they'll have no answer and they can't deal with it and the wife's going to make them feel horrible. So if you're on their side and you're working with them, you know, let's talk about how we can help you. They're like, okay, let's talk. Let's see how you're going to help me. Okay, that sounds like a good talk. So I think that may be the approach that we'll get through it. But if you start with condemnation, the research tells us, however you start the conversation, it just follows that trajectory. So if you start the conversation like, hey, can we talk about helping you? I think this is really good. It's just going to keep going up. You always do this, and we have to talk about it. It's just going to keep going down. The first 3 seconds of your conversation, first 5 seconds, is the predictor 90% of the time where it ends up. And generally, it doesn't go like that. It just keeps going in whatever direction you start. So I think that's important.
Prabhu, is it fair to say that anger is an emotion?
It's fair to say that anger is a secondary emotion, and there's something that is primary that's causing the anger. So whenever you're angry, you want to look at, well, what is causing the anger? You know, like you let me down, you disappoint. You came home late, and I'm angry. Why? Oh, it's a trust issue. You didn't call. You know, you disrespected me. You didn't call. It's something that's triggering the anger, and the anger is just a symptom of a deeper problem. Yeah, I
But
mean,
the
yeah.
asking that
Is it negative for you to be angry? Is that what you're asking?
because we were talking about men and feelings, and it seems to me to be a feeling that men tend to comfortably express. But then what I hear you saying is that it's a secondary emotion because what's behind it is an unmet need. So
Yeah.
then that lead me to think, okay, then that's because they're not knowing or not feeling safe to what their original needs are. So then as a woman,
well, it could be one other thing. They don't even know what their needs are, and they're just frustrated.
So then as a woman, when we're at the receiving end of that anger and we feel hurt, then everything just shuts down.
Yes. Yeah.
That's so difficult.
Well, my wife's a marriage counselor, and she said what you said. Behind every criticism is an unmet need. So if you, just like we as men have to read your language, when you say, I don't like you, that means come sit down, let's talk, or something like that. You know, we have to read its opposite, which is not always easy because we get affected. If you say something negative to us, then you have to learn to read men also. When they're criticizing, it's an unmet need. Or criticizing could be a psychological weakness also, that they're just frustrated with themselves. That's possible. And so taking it personally is the worst thing you can do, because then you're going to react and get angry, and then you guys will start fighting. If you can if you can get criticism out of your marriage, condemnation out of your marriage, those are the two most toxic things in your marriage. So what I could say is, you as women try to figure out how to eliminate that. And if your husband's criticizing you or angry, say, you know, it seems like there's something bothering you. You want to talk about it? You know, it's like something must be going on. How can I help you? What are you upset about? You know, that's an amazing way to communicate. If you can, not always easy, but to see what's there.
So we have another topic that has come up that I think a lot of ladies will be to. And this lady is, she feels that for many women, it's a very common need to have physical, loving affection.
Yes.
Embracing and, you know, that kind of an affection.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to tie it into another question that I was
just marry an old man, then it's not a problem. He won't have a problem.
So what he's saying is that for some men this might be disturbing. So that
yes.
Woman really needs this physical affection, and on the other hand, the man is somehow disturbed by it. And so she's asking, what do we do in that situation if we perhaps as women feel that we're wired in that way, that we need affection?
Yeah.
How can we get that need met in a fair way? And there was another lady asking, oh, I'm not finding it now. I'll tack it on perhaps a little bit later.
Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question.
Ways to show affection to our male partner?
Well,
or how, what ways do men feel loved and appreciated in a relationship?
Okay, so number one, if that's a need that you have as a woman, and that need is strong and your husband is not fulfilling that need, he needs to know that there are different love languages. And one love language is doing things. One love language is saying things. One love language is touching. And there's one more, I forget. Does anybody know the other one? There's, I think, 4. Demonstrating you love them, giving them things, telling them you love them, and then physical. Anything else? Anything else?
I think action was a love language.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
action. Yeah. So if that's important to you because that's your love language, you have to explain that to him and say, okay, there are different love languages. You can buy me a new car, but if you don't embrace me, I'll be like, next week I'll be miserable. And that won't make sense to him at all. It's like, I just bought you a car. I thought that would make you happy for like the next 3 years. No, that's not exact, doesn't exactly work that way. So you have to explain it. It doesn't exactly work that way. And you have to explain why and what's important. And there's a number game here that men don't understand. If your husband brings you 12 roses, that's nice. That's one nice thing he did. But if he brings one rose every day, that's 12 nice things he did. But he'll think, well, I brought 12 roses one day. That's as good as bringing 12 roses for 12 days. But you score differently than he scores, right? You know, like I said, he buys the car and he thinks, okay, I don't have to do anything for 3 years. But he just got 1 point or maybe 5 points for the car. He could have got 12 points for 12 roses in 12 days, right? So you have to explain these things to him because he doesn't understand that.
Not sure that they hear it so well always.
What's that?
It's not always so well received. I personally feel that actually women tend to be very easily pleased. Like you said, bring one flower and we're as happy as if you brought us a dozen.
Yes.
I hear a lot that men think women are so complicated, but I personally am not so much in agreement with that. Of course, different personalities are different, but I find that women are actually very easily pleased with very small gestures.
Yes, it's true.
But
it is true. It's totally true. Yeah.
So we have a lady asking about how is the thought process of men different from women, and how can we understand them better so that we don't expect so much from them?
The first word I didn't hear. How is the what cast?
Yes, the thought process of men different, and asking about the psychology of men. How can we understand them so we don't have as many expectations or perhaps the wrong expectations?
I think we need another class for that to answer that question. But what I would suggest is that if you're in a relationship or going to be in one in the future of your life, if you can listen to talks, lectures, read books on the nature of women, the nature of men, it really helps. Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami has talked a lot about the nature of women because it's a men's school. So he's helped the boys understand that, and that is invaluable. I think invaluable lessons for boys. Books that help you understand the nature of men, invaluable. Otherwise, men will do things and you won't understand why, and you'll take it in the wrong way. Or, like the typical classical example, you have a problem you want to talk about and they want to solve it, and you don't want them to solve it, you want them to listen. But men are wired as problem solvers. And so you're thinking, why won't he listen? And he's thinking, why won't she stop talking because I have the solution? And once you understand men are solution oriented, or once he understands you just wanted to talk the problem out or just get it off your chest, then, oh, okay, now I understand. And then the next time you have a problem, he'll say, do you want me to solve it or do you want me to listen? And you can say, okay, this time solve it. Oh, this time listen. And then he'll totally understand. And then you'll understand. There's one other, I just want to do a little skit here because it's so funny. You women, when you have problems, you want to talk about it. When men have problems, they don't want to talk about it. They just want to sit by themselves. And if you come up and you say, what's wrong? He'll say nothing. And he's just being annoyed that you don't leave him alone because something's wrong and he doesn't want to talk about it. He just wants to zone out. And then you'll say, looks like something's wrong. Do you want to talk about it? And he'll say, no, I don't want to talk about it. And in your mind, you're thinking, why doesn't he want to talk about it? Because that's what I do when I have problems. And you'll ask him, why didn't you want to talk about the problem? Because I don't want to talk about it. And it doesn't make sense to you, isn't it? And you're just disturbing him because he just wants to be left alone. But when you have a problem, you may not want to be left alone. You may want to talk about it. And until you understand men sometimes like to be left alone to just sort it out. You won't understand it. Won't make sense. You won't be able to deal. Oh, he has a problem. Don't talk to him. He'll be fine in just let him sit alone for half an hour. He'll be fine in a half hour. He comes back in half an hour. Okay, what's for dinner? Everything's fine, and you're like, that makes no sense. But now you understand. For him, it makes sense. But if you didn't understand that, you're going to just want to talk to him.
So we have asking, how or in what ways do men feel loved and appreciated in a relationship? I think this is such an important question.
Well, my introduction to this question came maybe 20 years ago, or 15. I heard a lecture by a pastor, and he said something. He said, men don't care if you love them. They just care if you appreciate them. He said, if you ask a man, you need to be loved by your wife? You need to be accepted by your wife? You need to be appreciated by your wife? Honored, respected. Oh yeah, I need respect. No, he used the word respect. Women want to be loved. Men want to be respected. Of course, if you ask a man, do you want to be loved by your wife? He'll say, yeah, that's nice. But the main thing is respect. That's his psychology. So if you just reinforce, like when your man does something well, you just reinforce this. That's amazing that you could do that. You're so talented, or you're so smart. Or he gives a class, or he leads a kirtan, or he fixes something. You go, your classes are amazing. It's like, nobody gives classes like you. Nobody leads kirtan. There's hardly anyone in ISKCON that gives classes. Yours are so special. That you just made like a $5 million deposit in your relationship just by letting him know you appreciate what he's doing. That's so important for a man. But if you go, how'd you like my class? It's okay. Like, don't do that. Even if it was okay, just say, oh, it was great, fantastic, you're so good. That's like the male ego needs that. And he needs it, as I said, he needs it most from his wife. That's the person who can enthuse that man, inspire that man more than anyone other than his guru, or maybe even more, is his wife, believe it or not. With all the macho men in ISKCON and all the women are this and women are that, when it comes down to male psychology, as Prabhupada said, behind every great man was a great woman. You have this incredible power to inspire him, and you have this incredible power to completely destroy him by criticizing him. So wherever you grab the chance, you see him doing something, go, wow, that was amazing. I love when you do that. You're so good at that. That inspires him. I think once my wife, when we were young, I was leading a kirtan, and she said something to me like, nobody leads kirtan like you. You lead the best kirtans. And I didn't believe that. But when she said it, I noticed that all my kirtans got better. I became, my confidence, I don't know if it was my confidence, I don't know what it was, but I noticed my kirtans just like, oh, I'm a better kirtaniya than I thought. I'm like one of the best. And my kirtans became better. And I never forgot that. And I realized that one compliment of my wife just like did so much to my ability to do kirtan better, or to give class, or whatever it was. So that is super important. You as wives have this amazing power. Even not as wives, just to tell a man, wow, it was a great class. He's like, oh, a woman told me that's a good class. Whoa. His next class is going to be even better. And you'll be responsible for his next class being better just by telling him that was a good class. Believe it or not. Women have that power to affect men. It's just crazy.
So we had one question come in about women and how they dress.
Yes.
And he's saying women like to dress up as it makes
Yes.
them feel good, and they have a great deal of pressure from society to maintain a good.
Yes.
So how do young women address this challenge? How do they express their femininity, but at the same time avoid being unchaste and disturbing to men?
Yeah. Just dress up, don't dress down. if you know what I mean. Yeah, okay, let me tell you something about my first time in India. It was 1975, and in India, all married women wore saris, and I don't even think they wore Punjabi outfits. I didn't notice. My battery's going to die. I just basically, except unmarried women or very young girls, maybe even unmarried women were wearing saris. So I remember once going to an office, there's a Singapore Airlines in Calcutta, and I had to rebook my ticket. And behind the counter was a very tall Indian woman, probably my age, and very beautiful and dressed in a sari. And I saw her, and I thought, this woman is quite beautiful. And I had zero sexual desire. Zero. Because it was an elegant, chaste kind of beauty that was appreciated not in a sexual way. So you have to think, how can I dress elegantly so that I'm a beautiful woman, but it's not sexualized woman. And that was the impression I got with many Indian women. They'd wear these beautiful saris and beautiful jewelry and so on. But the way they carried themselves, there wasn't any kind of sexual vibration. And obviously, because their bodies were covered, there was no sexual vibration. But just the whole way they carried themselves, they could be extremely beautiful, but it wouldn't arouse the men. But if they weren't dressed that way, the men would be aroused. And when they're not, and they're dressed in a way where everything's skin tight or they're showing a lot of skin, then the men think, oh, well, she's interested in sex. Otherwise, why she would dress that way? But it's not what the women are necessarily thinking, but it communicates that to the men. So you have to be careful what you communicate to the men, because you may communicate something, but it's not how you feel, but in the way you dress, in their mind, it communicates something else. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think this becomes easier to understand as one gets older, as a woman.
Yeah, you see it, and you. Okay.
It can be subtle things. Prabhu, what would you say that perhaps women either misunderstand the most or have the hardest time wrapping their minds around what men's needs are when it comes to communication? That's a very open-ended question.
What men need in terms of opening them up to communication, or what men need?
Just in general, what do we need to know in order to more effectively communicate and more effectively inspire communication?
Start talking about what they're interested in. They will talk their head off. If you want them to talk, just talk about what they're interested in. Oh, I saw, something that's so like irrelevant to your world, but it's a very man thing, and you show interest in it. Wow, that's like major, you get major deposits for that. You show interest in, it's like, it's not a woman thing, it's a guy thing. But for a girl to be interested in a guy thing, just like if your husband's interested in cooking, that's like, wow, he likes to cook. That's more considered feminine. Or, he likes to sew clothes for the deities in your house. Like, wow, that's really cool. So you turn it around. That's a major for a man, that you're like interested. Show me what you're doing. Show me what you're working on, or whatever. What did you work on at your job? And so I worked on this. Explain it to me. How does it work? Show me. I want to see. That's huge. Of course, it may not do anything for you personally directly, but it'll definitely enhance the relationship, because most men would just be, would like to be able to relate to a lot of what goes on in their life to women who don't really understand it, or to do things that he likes to do that you don't like to do. He's like, hey, you want to climb a mountain? It looks kind of dangerous, and I'm not really into it. If you did it, it'd be like, wow, major. Okay, let's do it. I don't know how good I am, but I'll try. I'm not like rock climbing or anything, but just, something that's like not so inclined. Do it. He'll be like, wow, that's fantastic. You'll bond much more. And so, so that's a starting point. Talk about things of interest to him. You know, what's going on with your day? Tell me about it. What did you do? What did you talk about? What happened at work? Just let him talk. You know, show interest in it. And don't ask him to talk and then with your body language show that you're totally bored. Because you probably will be totally bored what he's saying, maybe. But it's a bonding tool, you know? And, you know, it's like, if he wants to talk about something and you go, and you say, I don't really want to talk about that. It just disgusts me. You know, it could be like politics or, you know, or you always talk about that. I'm sick of hearing that. Okay, that may be there sometimes, but it, you know, sometimes it's like if it's important for him and you keep saying, I'm sick of hearing you talk about it, that's not good. And sometimes he wants to talk about it just so he can figure it out in his head because it's like problematic and he needs to talk about it. And that's why he talks about it, so he can figure it out. So if you can do that, wow, you could get any man in the universe to marry you tomorrow. The secret. The
Prabhu, we
secret.
be respectful of your time. Do you feel like taking any more questions?
If they're good. Okay. Yeah. Well,
Oh,
well, I guess if we can finish now rather than having to do another session, it would be easier for me time-wise to finish, to take more questions now rather than have to have a whole other hour and a half. If we can, shoot, and then when I get hungry, I'll stop because it's.
you know, topic we never discussed. So I'm sure there would be certainly ladies happy for another session. So let's see how far we can go. So there's one lady asking, what is the role or duty of a man and woman in Grihastha life as per Vedic scriptures? And how do we, she's saying, how do we decode this to current day of living? So I guess she's meaning, how do we make that work in our modern
Yeah, exactly. Well,
body devotees, especially?
yeah. I think the first thing you have to establish why you're married, and you're married to help one another become Krishna conscious. And then when that's established, everything else you do that helps one another become Krishna conscious, that's good. Even if it doesn't look good according to like certain standards that we may acknowledge it. This is how a wife should be, this is how a husband should be. But maybe the wife can't exactly be that way or the husband can't exactly be that way, but the result is that it's helping them in Krishna consciousness. So my philosophy is, if I expect my wife to be a certain way, she also has to be agreeable that that's within her nature and within her ability and her comfort zone to be that way. Because if I'm demanding her to be that way and she can't really do it, or it's outside her comfort zone, it creates a stress in the marriage. So I'm kind of like forcing her to act as the Vedic standard. But the result is it's corrupting our marriage, or she's forcing me to act as the ideal Vedic husband. But some of that's out of my comfort zone. And if I say, you know, I understand, but I really can't do that. It's really going to be stressful or difficult. And she says, it's not, you want me to be this way, but it's not really my nature. It's not who I am. And then we're okay with that. We talk about it. We say, okay, I respect that. Then everything goes fine. But if you stick to these standards and try to reinforce them, try to enforce them to a point where it puts the other person in an unnatural situation, then it starts degrading the marriage. And then even in the name of being Vedic, you've just kind of degraded the marriage. So what's the point? So I don't think ultimately Prabhupada's point was you have to be a Vedic 100%. Just stay together, be Krishna conscious. If you do that, that is the goal of the Veda. You know, it's the goal of the Vedas, be Krishna conscious. Remember Krishna. If you got that, then you did it. And if you're just Vedic and you end up divorced, that, I guess it didn't work. So what was the point? That's how I see it. I don't know if everybody sees it that way, but that's the practical way I see it. You're muted now.
Yes. It's feels like such a responsibility to ask the good questions so we don't have to let you go. So on Zoom, and this lady's saying, my husband needs a lot of acknowledgement and for me to be interested in him.
Yes.
And I try. He doesn't listen to me when I try to talk about myself or my thoughts. He interrupts, subject walks off. It makes me cold and inclined to not give him my time and energy. Please,
Yeah.
can you?
Yeah. I don't know your husband, and I don't know how you could explain this, but one thing that that could help is to talk about the relationship and how, you know, the relationship that we have is important for us and it's important for our Krishna consciousness. And I think we should do things that help the relationship and make us closer, because it'll be good for us and it'll be good for our spiritual life. And I really like hearing from you. I really like being interested in what you're doing. But I also have this need for you to hear from me, and that would really help me and inspire me. And I know it's difficult for you, and I see you don't always like to do it. But if you could do that, I just wanted to let you know it would really help me, and it would help our relationship. So that's a place to start. If that doesn't work, then come back and ask me and tell me what's happening, and we can go from there.
So let me see. One lady made a point. It's not a question, but perhaps you have something to say about it. And she says, one of the saddest things is for married devotee men to seek or be given advice from non-married devotees regarding their wives or how to be married.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Advice
yeah.
don't like or have good relationships with women. And she says some men listen to what they want to listen to. Of course, we can say that about women too. But.
That happened to me. That happened to me recently when some woman wrote me and her husband was getting some advice. And I looked at the advice and I say, he must be getting advice from a brahmachari. And she said, yeah. And I said, tell your husband to get advice from a grihasta, and not any grihasta, but a grihasta with a good marriage. It's just like, you want to learn how to make money and you're talking to a brahmachari about how to make a lot of money? No, go find a millionaire and ask him how to do it. That's the principle. You know, you don't want to get mentored by, you know, a poor brahmachari if you're trying to make $1 million, unless he has made $1 million already. So I think that's a totally valid point, 100%, you know. There's a funny story. One sannyasi was giving a class and he was talking about women, and he was talking about marriage. And one of the members of the GVT, the Grihastha Vision Team in America, came up to him and said, Maharaj, I took objection to what you said, because that's not actually going to help marriage, what you said. It could undermine. And he was very humble. He said, so what should I say about marriage? And she said bluntly, and she's very funny and blunt, she said, you shouldn't say anything about marriage because you don't know anything about it. Just don't talk about it. So sometimes it's like that, you know, it's like the Shastras are talking about marriage and you're a brahmachari or sannyasi and you have to talk about the verse. But, you know, if the temple's smart, they'd look at the verses, and on those days, they'd ask a senior successful grihasta to give the class, not a brahmachari. Right? That makes sense? So I think it's a very good point. 100% agree. You have to be careful. And ladies, you have to be careful who's giving your husband advice, because it may not always be the best advice, because they just don't have experience, or their limited context. Okay. We'll go to 3 o'clock. My 3 o'clock. What time? It's late for you guys, right? Some of you, it's late. Okay, we'll go 5 more minutes.
Very
Special bonus.
riveting topic. Do you have any closing words of anything you think that would be important to share that maybe hasn't been addressed?
Yeah.
There's a rabbit hole that we don't have time to go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'd like to Then after that, I'll pass over to Claudia so she can close.
Well, I think especially when you're newly married and you're living, you may have a brother, you have a father, you have a brother, but the relationship is different when you get married with that person. It's a totally different dynamic. And you may think you know men because you know your brother and father, but then you realize I don't know men that well. And so you are going to run into things that men do that you won't understand, that won't make sense. And it's extremely important to understand what makes them tick and why they do that. Because that way you can distinguish between, oh, that's just the way men do it, or that's actually a dysfunction, or that's something he could improve upon. He didn't learn from his father. So it may be very male, but not all males do it that way, and he can improve. So I think that's important. And so as a wife, one of your jobs is to figure out how you can help your husband be a better husband without making him feel like there's something wrong with him. How you can work together under the premise that we want to make the marriage better, and I want to help you be a better husband, and you help me be a better wife, so we can make the marriage better. And then I think that way he'll be more open, and then you can both help one another. That's my closing words. And now it's time for Miss Sadhvi Sangha to have some closing words, right?
Claudia, would you like to step in? I was tricked into doing this. Krishna tricked me.
No, you did good. You presented things perfectly.
Here she is.
She's back.
Thank you very much, Mahatma Prabhu. I think I speak for all of us if I say that I think we learned a lot, and even if some of the things we've heard before, I think it's really good to be reminded. And as one of the members commented, I think as women, it's very important that we understand men better, so we have compassion for the struggles and the challenges they have, and that not only we know how to communicate better to our husbands, but we also know within our communities how to treat all men, with more respect and care, and even if that means just, keeping a bigger distance. So thank you very much.
Right.
I do hope that you will again join us and further enlighten us on what I feel is this very important topic.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted, like I said, this is probably 10 years in my mind wanting to let women know that there's a few things about men that they wouldn't naturally know. And I feel it's important because then, like you said, they can respect men properly and understand their challenges and deal with them in a way that would help them in their challenges. So nice seeing all of you. And,
I don't devotees know that Mahatma Prabhu is a prolific class giver and video creator, and he addresses all the topics that nobody else wants to. So I encourage you to look at his YouTube channel and his SoundCloud, his Facebook page, and I'll share all of those links. I'll try and sneak them into the chat before we close out if I have time. But he really has a wealth of information and knowledge.
Well, it's quite easy, just remember Mahatma Das, and then everything comes up, the Facebook, the website, the SoundCloud, the YouTube. And if you ever need a marriage counselor, that's what my wife does professionally. So she's been helping lots of devotees. And we intend to also do a full course on marriage as she was trained to give. That was very, very helpful. So it's our service to all of you, if I can help you. I want to say one last thing. Sorry, Dia. I have this goal, and I don't know how I'm going to pull it off, but I think maybe worldwide we can do this. And I think Radhe Govinda was also contributing to this. To have like a training program that everyone has to go through before any ISKCON priest would marry them, so that or not even that. I would say the training before they even get engaged. Don't even dare to be engaged with this man unless he's gone through this training program, because there's so many things he won't understand that could compromise the marriage. So that we know that when people are coming into the marriage, they understand all these things we're talking about and more, and there's some kind of maybe clean bill of health, that this person does not have any past issues, traumas, etc., that could create problems in the marriage. Wouldn't that be good that we knew, okay, these people, these are graduates, they're psychologically healthy, they've been trained as good wives and husbands? That would be fantastic. Because so many women want to get married and they say, Prabhu, do you have a good husband for me? And I think, I go down the list. Everyone who's not married. No, I don't think so. And sometimes it's like that. It's like, I can't give you this guy. He's a nice guy, but he's not ready to be married. He's still like a little teenage kid, even though he's 35. I can't. And so unless we have that kind of training, and if they need psychological help, therapy, to get over some of their past issues that could become very problematic in the marriage, then, you know, we're offering you men, or men are being offered women that could be liabilities in the long run. So I think that would be a dream come true, you know. And I always joke, don't marry a man who's not been to Mahatma Marriage University, you know. But, you know, the joke is true, you know, not that it necessarily has to be called that or just me, but, you know, something of that nature, I think, is really, really important. Then you could know. Like we have in America, if you buy a used car, it's certified, 90-point check, you know, and warranted for a year, and we've checked this car out, you know. Here's a man, he's certified, 90-point check. And I have to get this phone call because Bhakti Mark Swami's calling me. Okay, Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Bol, muchas gracias. Thank you.
Oh, we
Hare Krishna, dear Vaishnavis. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and I hope that you found the session very valuable and insightful. As Kamaniya mentioned, Mahatma Prabhu gives daily classes, so you can see his classes live on his Facebook page. And as he also mentioned, his wife, Janava Mataji, is a marriage counselor who can be contacted for support, advice, and also counseling. And she also offers a marriage course. She recently offered a free online course for explaining the harmful relationship through marriage, and she's going to be doing a course on marriage soon. So please look out for that. We will definitely inform you on the Sati Sangha WhatsApp groups and also on the Sati Sangha Facebook page. So again, thank you all very much for joining us tonight. If you have any more specific topics you would like Mahatma Prabhu or someone else to cover, or if you've got any specific questions, please send that to us either via Facebook or to our email. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for an amazing service you're doing.
Thank you. So everyone, Mahatma Prabhu has left us, but you're welcome to say Hare Krishna before we go.
I'm so grateful to the ladies who turn their cameras on. So it's not just the, you know, the usual 3 or 4 usual suspects. And it's so nice for us as the Satsanga team to get to see the sweet souls who are members of the group. So we can stop streaming now. Is that possible, Sharadia? And then if we like, we can take an opportunity to quickly introduce ourselves. Is that something I have to do? You're muted, Sharadia, you're muted.
So at the bottom of your screen, you can just press the end of the live streaming and it will stop.
An end meeting for all.
No, don't end the meeting. Just the live streaming. You'll see that there's like a little button at the bottom of your screen.
Stop live. Yeah?
Yes.
Thank you, Facebook friends.